So yeah, I recently saw this skeet on Blue Sky saying, "What the f do you mean you can evolve Eevee into Jolteon in Gen 1 by getting into a trainer battle, leveling Eevee up, switching to Growlithe, and then finishing the battle with Growlithe because Growlithe's Pokemon index is the same as the Thunderstone's item index?" That's not something I knew beforehand, and I thought it was really cool. And just had me thinking more about the first generation of Pokemon games, particularly, Pokemon Red, Blue, Green, and Yellow. Just what sort of makes them so cool to me. They're very special games to me, games I've wanted to make larger videos about in the past, just because I think I guess what I said in my Blue Sky post, I think Gen 1 is very alive. I think there's a sense of mystery to it and a sense of something going on, that there's something, that you almost can't control or you aren't supposed to fully understand, which gives it almost a feeling of like an ecosystem to me, of something that's somewhat autonomous almost, something that has a soul, and I don't think the game literally has a soul, but I do think there's a certain humanity, or inhumanity, that it gets. And I think there's a reason why it's been such a subject of things like creepypastas, of childhood rumors, that kind of stuff, like playground rumors. People like talking a lot about this game, saying, "Wow, this is like a game where like the playground rumors are like real, or even like not nearly as crazy as what's the truth." But like the truth is, the kinds of games that produce like playground rumors are games like Pokemon Gen 1 that just, do have these mysterious qualities to them. So yeah, I don't know. I've always been partial to it. Gen 2 were my first Pokemon games, but I kind of grew up with the Gen 1 era of Pokemon media, so I definitely have some bias here. But I think if you have it and you're aware of it and you still believe what you believe, then you have every right to sit down and declare your thoughts and defend them. So yeah, what I'm gonna do here, instead of doing a big ass essay or whatever, which maybe I'll do that at some point, I've got this post from 2016 called "The Problem with Gen 1," because it's even worse than we thought. And just gonna caveat ahead, I think this was made in good fun. It's full of a lot of interesting information. I'm sure whoever made this really does have a lot of passion. You don't make something like this if you don't have passion for what you're talking about. This is like Third Strike is broken, Melee is broken, those kinds of things where it's like, yeah, we're pointing out the flaws, but it's clearly something that's happening out of love. So yeah, I'm just going to go through some of these and sort of give an off-the-cuff rebuttal. I don't actually know the most about how Gen 1 works mechanically. I'm really more just into Gen 1 challenge runs. I'm a big fan of Scott's thoughts in particular. I really enjoy his sort of laid back and kind of droll demeanor. He's very friendly, very clearly just, super into Pokemon, especially seemingly very into Gen 1. He does really interesting at times, sometimes less interesting, just because of sometimes that's the best way to go about things. Like Pokemon Yellow, single Pokemon speedruns. The fun thing with these runs is you learn pretty quickly that not using glitches in Gen 1 is actually just about impossible. If you are getting into regular like trainer battles as you get through the game, you are engaging with glitches. So there really is no glitchless run for the game. Like if there was a glitchless run, people would have to be like going out of their way to avoid glitches. And I think that's kind of awesome. I think there's a hindsight, retrospective based thinking that wants to judge these games by the merits. I guess one is like a competitive game, like a balanced modern competitive game, which is what Pokemon is now. And then also wants to judge them just as a Pokemon RPG in general by the standards of later games. And I think what's really cool with Gen 1 is if you look at it as more just like a weird JRPG for what is basically like a souped up graphing calculator, you know? It's certainly not the only RPG on the Game Boy. There's some cool RPGs on the Game Boy, but it is a different space than, the space that I think most people that are judging these games are coming from. I don't think most people are as familiar with 8-bit RPGs as they are with Pokemon. If someone has played only one 8-bit RPG in their life, it may very well be these games. Without further ado, let's start refuting these foolish claims against the game. Okay, so the problem with Gen 1, because it's even worse than we thought. Number one, there's no PP tracking on enemies. When they do run out of PP, well, they never do. I think that's fine. I'm not a cop. I don't really care if the CPU is using Hyper Beam 6 times. Personally, I don't think that's a big deal. They're CPUs. They're not real people. So that's okay. Not only were critical hits based on speed, they also occurred 4 times more often than it was supposed to be, making fast Pokemon do insane amounts of crits. Yeah, that's awesome, actually. I really love that. If you thought it couldn't get any worse, the intended critical hit ratio applied when you had focus energy, making it essentially quarter your critical hit rate. Yeah, so I think that's really funny. All of these things are, like, if you're aware of them, actually, like, interesting and fun to play with. One, I think it makes speed a lot more interesting. I think base speed in particular is what really boosts your crit rate, is my understanding. But there's a fun interplay, and I think it comes up later in this. If you have a critical hit in Pokemon Gen 1, it doesn't actually include your stat increases into the equation. So what that means is that, like, if you're running a Pokemon that's really dependent on, like, Swords Dance, or just using the badge boost glitch, which is a whole other boondoggle in this game that I think is really cool, having a high crit rate can actually be a problem, because you don't actually want that. So in those cases, I've actually seen some runs, from Scott's Thoughts, where focus energy is actually used in order to prevent crits, because he's relying on, using stat boosting moves, and he doesn't want his boosted stats to be thrown out when he gets a crit. I just think that's like a fun interaction, personally. I think that kind of works, actually. One-hit KO moves were also based off of speed, making most of them totally useless because they were mostly on slower guys. This is another take that I feel like is just, like, entirely, maybe this is a case for competitive play, but, like, I'm pretty sure, like, the typical, like, red version speedrun involves, giving Nidoking Horn Drill. So I feel like that's not really, that's not really true. I think one-hit KO moves are a little niche, but also, like, I think that's kind of what you'd want them to be. I think there are some weird parameters in which they just don't work, but, like, they're one-hit KO moves, so, like, I don't really care if they have some limits. I think they actually have kind of a larger role in Gen 1 than other games, and I think that's kind of fun. That they exist, but they also have all these weaknesses. If you use a sleep-inducing move on a Pokemon that had to recharge from Hyper Beam, the attack would completely ignore accuracy and always hit. What if the Pokemon is affected by another status? Then the old status will be magically gone. That's just kind of odd, yeah. I guess that's kind of cool, though, right? Like, you use Hyper Beam, and then you're just kind of tired out, They're, like, already tired, Like, they already used Hyper Beam. They're sleepy. And now they're tired. So, yeah, of course, they fall asleep really easily after that. That makes sense to me. All right, so I'm waiting for a real problem here. If a Pokemon had less HP than what Leech Seed would drain, the other Pokemon would recover the amount of HP that Leech Seed would have normally drained, rather than the HP the Pokemon actually had. You know what's even worse? If the Pokemon was also affected by poison or burn and died to it, Leech Seed would still drain up before the fainted Pokemon was removed from the field. Again, that sounds super specific. I don't really think that matters that much. It could be a problem. It could be good. I think it's fine. If you're frozen, you never thaw unless someone uses a fire move against you, or haze is used. Yeah, I think that's, and Blizzard has 90% accuracy. Yeah, that is broken. I'm not gonna argue with that. Freeze is broken in Gen 1. I do love that though too. I just think that's really fun from a, like, there's, it's the kind of thing you implement like just to implement it. Like haze cures the status conditions of your opponent. And like, like you requires your opponent to be cooperative or just not know what's going on. And it's the kind of interaction that you can sort of imagine the game developers just kind of throwing in for fun. Just kind of throwing in to like see, like sort of create like a little system of logic. And I think that's really fun. I love, like, I've been working on some video games lately, and I love introducing those kinds of interactions. It really is like a really fun way to make your game feel more alive. But yeah, no, freezing is silly. Freezing is very silly in in Gen 1, definitely. Wrap, bind, fire spin, and clamp prevent the opponent from doing anything for 2 to 5 turns. If you're slower than the dude trapping you, you're screwed until the move misses. Say you're very smart and figure out that you can use items while trapped. Then watch out, because if the trapping attack ends and you get put to sleep in one of those turns, you never wake up until you switch or die. I think that's funny. I think Wrap is like, the way Wrap and like Fire Spin, all those moves like work in Gen 1 is like absurd and messed up, but also like what they got replaced with is like so lame. Like they kind of just got turned into like really weak versions of like Poison or like Leech Seed or something like that. Like it just does passive damage to them every turn, but the amount is like so small it doesn't matter. So I kind of like the mini game of Wrap in Gen 1. I feel like it's a kind of mini game that no one enjoys because you're still doing very little damage with each attack, but it's like I don't know. I think it's kind of cool. Every attack in the game except for Swift and Bide has at least a 1 out of 256 chance of missing. The Gen 1 miss. Yeah, I think the Gen 1 miss is awesome. Because yeah, you know what? If you make a creature tackle another creature, you're trying to tell me that there's a 100% chance that creature is going to tackle the other creature? No, I think we can leave some leeway. I think 1 out of 256 chance that any move misses. I think that's logical, frankly. That's absolutely fine. Leech Seed, Poison, and Burn all use the same residual damage function. Every time the toxic counter built up, the damage dealt by Leech Seed or Burn would also increase by the same amount. Leech Seed also made Toxic's damage increase twice as fast. But how on earth is the Burn status relevant to this? Well, obviously it's relevant because it's using the same residual damage function, right? Like, this isn't world building, this is programming. And like, that's just kind of a happy little accident. And I think that's fun. I don't think it's game breaking. I think, again, these are just fun. These are just fun ideas. Because while using Rest would cure your poison, it wouldn't reset the toxic counter. So being poisoned again, or burned, or seeded would cause a hilarious amount of damage if the toxic counter had gone up by a lot. Something else that Rest doesn't reset is your stat losses from burn or paralysis. You get rid of the status, but your stats stay lowered. I think that's kind of cool. Like, kind of give Rest a little bit of risk. I know that Rest is like, because when you wake up, you do have that turn where you can't do anything in Gen 1. It shouldn't be amazing. I'm pretty sure it's still pretty good in Gen 1. I don't know. I think it's fun. I think that's fun. The real problem is just that none of this is communicated to you. I think if you're aware of this stuff, I think it's interesting. I think if you're not aware of it, you can get screwed over by it. But I think even then, getting screwed over by the Mysterious video game has some appeal to it to me. I don't know. That's just me. Maybe if I didn't grow up with it, I wouldn't have the affection to feel that way. Counter. Where to start? It only worked on normal and fighting attacks. It could be used to bounce back attacks from previous turns and even from non-active Pokemon or from yourself, as long as the target had not used any moves after that last damaging attack. I'm a little confused with this one. Or had only used some select residual moves that do not reset the data of the last amount of damage dealt. You could even counter the damage from a previous counter or from fixed damage moves like Seismic Toss as well as the damage dealt to your substitute. There are even more quirks to the move. I could go on forever. This person just seems to think counter is cool too, so I won't even argue with them there. I think this person likes counter. That's really interesting. So it just counters whatever the last move used, no matter who used it. I kind of like that. If you could kill somebody with Hyper Beam, you don't have to recharge. That is awesome. That is sick. That is fighting games right there. You can evolve Pokemon that normally require an evolutionary stone for it by having them level up in a trainer battle, and by finishing the battle with a Pokemon with its internal number matching the internal number of the required stone. That is like so weird. I think someone was saying it must be because like when you use a stone to level up, what they do is they kind of warp you to like the end of a battle to sort of, because that's like where level ups also happen and stuff like that. Something like that. But that's just so weird, yeah. I feel like a lot of what's going on in Pokemon is they've only got like a couple spots that they can store numbers. So they're just constantly juggling where they can put the numbers. And like really weird things happen as a result. And, that's fun. Criticals would ignore stat ups from both parties. Yeah, we talked about that earlier. 3 Swords Dances do more damage than a crit, resulting in hilarious luck stacking situations. Raising your speed would completely negate the speed loss from paralysis. Paralysis cuts your speed in half, but then agility just gives you back your regular speed and then doubles it. The same goes for attack and burn. That's fine. Kind of hate how paralysis slows me down. Mimic randomly mimics an enemy move. Is it random? I thought it wasn't random, but I'll take your word for it. You can use this to have duplicate moves on your moveset. That's awesome. Disable randomly disables an enemy move. It also builds the rage counter. Okay. When a Pokemon's HP is 255 or 511 below its max HP, recovery moves will fail. Don't ask why, just don't. Okay. Psychic type moves are broken because ghost attacks do nothing to them, and because psychic attacks are only resisted by other psychics. Yeah. Yeah, that's like such a funny glitch that just held all the way through, that like ghosts were supposed to be good against psychic types and then they just forgot. That's so funny. Only dragon type attack was Dragon Rage, which always dealt 40 damage. I think that's fine because there's only 3 dragons in the entire game, and they're kind of like what Big Yellow said in their most recent video. Is that, they're kind of like a secret, they're kind of a secret Pokemon type. A Pokemon type nowadays is supposed to be this thing that's a bit more self-contained and cohesive and can sort of stand on its own. But back then, like Pokemon Gen 1, this is just an RPG, It's like we just created a special class of monsters for this RPG that like show up extremely rarely and only have a couple reps. That's absolutely fine, I think, in a like regular RPG. So, yeah, I don't think that's a big deal. Whirlwind and Roar didn't do anything in Link battles. That's too bad. Substitute didn't protect you from status except poison and confusion. Moreover, breaking a substitute ended the secondary effects of most attacks. If someone kills a sub with Hyper Beam, they don't have to recharge. Cool. If somebody kills a sub with a recoil move, they take no recoil. Cool. If somebody kills a sub with Explosion or Self-Destruct, they don't die from using it. That's kind of cool too. If you're defrosted during a turn when you haven't moved yet, you would use the last move you had selected before being frozen out of nowhere, even if it was a move selected by another Pokemon. If you had not selected any move in the current battle, you would use a glitch attack. That's awesome. I would say that's probably something very hard to trigger though, right? Special damaging moves like Nightshade Counter or Bide completely ignore type immunities. Ironically, ghosts are immune to struggle because it's a normal type instead of typeless. I think it's okay that struggle's a normal type move. It probably should be a normal type move. Ghosts are just, let ghosts have that, They didn't get the psychic thing. So, let them have immunity to struggle, If you hit with a super effective move, the message displays only reflects whether or not the move was super effective against the type of the 2 that had its type matchup coded first. Yeah, there's a lot of glitchy, super effective messages in that game. That is annoying. I do not like that. I won't defend that. Ethers and elixirs could not be used on moves that had PP ups. Yeah, unfortunate. Probably just a programming problem. You could deposit all but your fainted Pokemon in the PC, then watch as you black out after taking 3 steps. That's awesome. Swift and Bide were able to hit a Pokemon that is in the invulnerable turn of Fly or Dig. Somehow. Because they don't have accuracy checks. I mean, that's kind of internally consistent there. They're moves that always hit, so they should hit. The AI was so dumb that most trainers would always use super effective moves, even if they were non-damaging. Yes, that means they would spam agility or barrier at your level 3 Weedle. That's specifically if they have the good AI, I believe, variant. Which is not always the best AI for them to have, because it will mean they'll do that. And I think in Red and Blue, yeah, like you can just cheese through, I think the champion. With Nidoking, partially because a lot of Pokemon will have agility, and they'll spam agility because it's psychic type, and then it'll just do nothing because it's the only move they'll use. And they won't run out of PP because they don't actually have PP. That's a funny thing. Oh yeah, and then Blaine uses super potions even when his Pokemon are already at full health. Yeah, Blaine just... I think all of the trainers, they just have like a... they have a token item, like all the gym leaders, and they just use it kind of sporadically. They don't really use it with any rhyme or reason. If Wrap, Bind, Fire Spin, or Clamp miss, when the other guy had to recharge Hyper Beam, it would automatically attack with Hyper Beam again instead of recharging. That's kind of funny. Get wrecked, I guess. If you use the last PP of Wrap, Bind, Fire Spin, or Clamp during a turn when your opponent decided to switch out, the PP underflows and becomes 63 instead of 0, while gaining 3 PP ups on the move, assuming it didn't have any. That's really interesting. Alright, so you use Fly or Dig to go high or go underground, but then you get paralyzed or hit yourself in confusion. You stay high or underground until you switch out or use the move again, and you are unhittable. Yep. Yeah, I believe that's why they banned... Did they ban both of those moves in competitive now? For Gen 1? I think they might have. Whenever one or more stat of the player's Pokemon was modified outside of a link battle, all the badge stat boosts are reapplied. Yeah, it's just like it sounds. Use Sword Stance, then you get a nice boost to all your other stats. Get attacked with Leer, have your stats boosted. Yeah, I love the badge boost glitch. Love a game where like boosting your stats is like actually just broken. Because it's really hard to like motivate yourself to do that in Pokemon, but like RBY does not give you a chance to disagree with that. You got to do it. Just seeing all the ways it sort of plays into the challenge runs that I've watched, I think it's really cool. I don't know. I like it. Whenever one or more stat was modified when the Pokemon whose turn it was paralyzed or burned, the speed attack drop would be applied again. So if you use Sword Stance when your opponent's paralyzed, their speed gets divided by 4. That's also like so cool. I don't know. I like the sort of ritual. I'm going to get some water. I like the rituals here. Switch out in a regular trainer battle. The opponents select their attack after you've switched out, so they always pick their best move against your new Pokemon. Well, just get good. Waking up from sleep takes an entire turn on its own. Hope you like being put back to sleep because you just announced your enemy to do that. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, sleep sucks. I will say, most of the sleep-causing moves are pretty inaccurate, so they are risky to use. If you captured a transformed Pokemon, the game assumed it had to be Ditto. It could have, for example, been a Spearow that mirror moved Transform, but the game just didn't give a crap. I mean, yeah, but like, when the fuck is that gonna happen? This is a fringe case. This is like, you're throwing rocks at the animals at the zoo, and then you're complaining that they get really mean when you throw rocks at them, Like, stop throwing rocks at the animals at the zoo. You could have your Ditto transform into a Pokemon with more than one attack, then switch your moves around with the select button during battle, and have your Ditto learn a glitch move. That is awesome! That is so cool! Now consider this. A Pokemon is put to sleep or becomes frozen while using multiple turn attacks like Solar Beam, Thrash, or Rage. If the Pokemon was cured of its sleep or freeze by Haze, that Pokemon would be unable to use any attack until it leaves the field. Well, I mean, it was frozen before, so it was already unable to do anything, as we've established. Attacking moves with paralysis chances can't paralyze Pokemon of the same type. Yep. Lick can't paralyze ghost types, Thunderbolt Thunderbolt can't paralyze electric types. Body Slam cannot paralyze normal types. Yeah. Well, that's because, like, poison moves can't poison types. Experience all significantly decrease the amount of experience points gained in battles where 2 or more Pokemon of your party took part. That's funny. The math wasn't mathing with it. That's good. HP draining moves like Absorb worked on substitutes. It sounds fine, but they were supposed to miss. Okay. Multi-hit moves and trapping moves like Wrap all did the exact same number of damage on all their hits of the same sequence. If one hit criticals, they all will. That's fun. I like that. If you used Bide and then the enemy used certain non-attacking moves or switched out, it counted as if they had used whatever they hit you with last turn for Bide damage. You could even accumulate damage from a previous battle that way. But there's more. If the enemy dies while you're storing damage with Bide, most of the damage remains stored. If it's the other way around, i.e. enemy using Bide, you die, all the accumulated damage is reset. You could use this to desynchronize Link battles. That's too bad. It's too bad that Link battles... I'm pretty sure they added Link battles pretty late in development. And like they had some trepidation over it, so... I feel like they just weren't actually that keen on having Link battles be in the game, so it kind of makes sense that they're a little buggy. Like, this is an 8-bit portable RPG with PvP. Like, not that much precedent for this. Made by a team that I don't think had ever made an RPG before. If you leveled up too fast, 2 or more levels at once, your Pokemon didn't learn the moves they should have learned in the past on the levels that were skipped. I guess get good. That is really funny. You can bypass the whole Rocket Hideout event to get the Sylph Scope by using the Pokédoll against the Ghost Marowak. Yeah, that's awesome. Scott's Thoughts uses that every time because the Rocket Hideout is boring. And I think optional skips are fun. Jump Kick and High Jump Kick only did 1 HP of crash damage instead of the 1/8 of the damage they would have dealt, which is what it was supposed to be. That's kind of funny. Good for them. If you hit yourself due to confusion while having a substitute up, the damage is dealt to your opponent's substitute. If your opponent doesn't have a substitute, no damage is dealt. Same goes for the crash damage of your jump kick attacks. That's awesome. If you were on a Link battle and you switched out of a mirror moved trapping move like Fire Spin, the move would hit on one side of the battle and miss on the other, desynchronizing the battle. That's too bad. If you check the status page of one of your Pokemon while your enemy had used Minimize or Substitute, its sprite would turn into a horrible monstrosity when you went back to the battle screen. That's sick. When a Pokemon attacked with a damaging move, if either the attacking or defending stat was higher than 255, they were both temporarily divided by 4 to make the calculation fit into a single bite. If the other stat was just 3 or lower, it would become 0 as a result, and in turn, make the game try to divide by 0 and freeze. If you used Reflect or Light Screen when your defense/special defense stat was 512 or higher, it would roll over into hilariously low numbers. If it was exactly 512 or 513, it would become 0 and cause a game freeze during the process of damage calculation. We love to see it. Psy Waves could deal 1 HP damage at minimum when used by the player, but could deal down to 0 HP used by the enemy. This could also desynchronize Link battles. Yeah, Link battles seemed like they were not ready for prime time. I think I understand why they made Pokemon Stadium. There could be situations where the Great Ball had a greater capture rate than the Ultra Ball, depending on the enemy's health. That's kind of fun, though. I kind of like that, too. Like, if the Pokeballs have, different mathematically intersecting optimal ranges, that's kind of fun. Rage. Okay, I read this one earlier. This one's entirely valid. Sounds awful. Damage from rage increases a level at a time every time you take a hit, but as soon as it connects, the user stops obeying and cannot use any other move or switch out until it dies. Not only that, but it never loses any rage PP except for the initial one. On top of that, if your accuracy is lowered or your enemy's evasion is raised, your accuracy will keep going down until it reaches 1 out of 256. What's the only thing worse than using rage until you die? Missing rage until you die. Yeah, that's pretty bad. And then it just says, now the special stat doesn't look too bad, eh? No, I kind of like, yeah, I like the special stat thing. I like kind of having special attack and special defense being the same stat. I think that's fun. I'm going to say that again. That's kind of the catchphrase of this whole excursion. So yeah, I guess that's the whole thing. So yeah, I think there are some more things with Gen 1 that you could probably complain about. Quality of life things for sure. Missing nose and stuff like that, but they don't even bother to put that on this list because everyone knows missing no is awesome. I love glitch Pokemon. I love glitch City. I love Mew glitch. Mew glitch is so cool. Doing Mew glitch as a kid, like finding a weird website that had Mew glitch information and like printing it out and like following the instructions and like, it's you got to start a whole new playthrough to do the Mew glitch because there's certain trainers you have to like have not battled in order to trigger it. So just going through that whole commitment, then getting to the point in the game where you can do the glitch and you can catch this level 7 Mew while you're leaving frickin' Lavender Town. So cool. Like, also flying away from a trainer battle when it's about to start and doing that as the way you trigger that. That is so cool. That is not something I see in the other games. I'm sure people are finding cool things to do in the other games. Scarlet and Violet seem pretty broken. But, that is just, like, really neat. Like, running away from a trainer and then, like, doing that to, like, do weird stuff to then trigger a wild encounter with a forbidden Pokemon. That's super fun.